okay if we hire someone to take some of his money to give to your mom? Would that be morally okay?
I think that's different because I think you vote with your feet, and if you live in this country, you are agreeing to pay some level of taxes, and while I don't agree with the amount of taxes that we're forced to pay in this country, I think there is some benefit to paying into the communal kitty to give to people who can't make money on their own, like my mother, for instance. But if you don't like this country, then get out. Like, that's just the rules of the game, in the game called America.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for coming. So,
Try to speak up and project.
Oh yeah, speak up to
Yeah.
the
so one question for you is: do you think it's okay? We obviously know each other and we came together and everything. So, and I kind of influenced the shirt buying yesterday, so that was kind of nice. But we have a neighbor that we don't particularly like. So, do you think it would be okay if I went over to Russ's house with a gun and just held it at his head and said, "Dude, I'm just gonna shoot you and take all your stuff"?
No.
Would that be morally acceptable? No. Okay, well, what if I got some people in the neighborhood that didn't like Russ too, and then just had them do it, so that I was out, and I didn't do it, just hire the hitman? Would that be okay? Morally?
Depends. Like, if I have a family that's starving and he's the only one that has food and everybody in the neighborhood is starving and he's, like, hoarding it, then that would change my perspective.
But that might change your perspective, but would you, if you're just looking at moralistically, like, would it be morally okay to do that? You might still go against your own morals if it's life and death, but morally, would it be okay to hire people to go take his stuff?
No, I guess I say no, because underneath it all, I'd still feel bad, but it's like, I gotta survive.
Right, and that's a whole different question. This is
Right,
just a
no, I get
morality
it.
question.
Yeah.
So then if you had a whole group of people, like maybe a couple thousand people, and said, hey, we really want to, like, disassociate ourselves from the dirty work, like, is it okay if those people did it on our behalf, because I just chipped in a little bit, but I was able to, like, vote somewhere, and then they went and they did it for me? Would that be all right?
No. Speaking from a moral stance, I don't believe under any circumstances I would ever feel good about somebody taking something from somebody else against their will.
Okay, so then knowing a little bit about you and your family situation, your mom receives some money from the government on disability. Mm-hmm. Is it okay that, this guy's in Pennsylvania, is it okay if we hire someone to take some of his money to give to your mom? Would that be morally okay?
I think that's different because I think you vote with your feet, and if you live in this country, you are agreeing to pay some level of taxes, and while I don't agree with the amount of taxes that we're forced to pay in this country, I think there is some benefit to paying into the communal kitty to give to people who can't make money on their own, like my mother, for instance.
Sure, but it's still like a moral argument, right? Like, I see you're trying to, like, get a job done and take care of people, but this is not, like, taxes are not the only way. Stealing from someone else without their consent is not the only way to solve that problem.
And I don't view it as stealing. I believe I'm in America because I'm choosing to be in America, and I choose not to live somewhere else. But if I wanted to, like, move to Brazil, then that would be different. But I'm an American citizen living in America, so it's kind of like part of the gig in my mind of, like, if I'm going to live in America, there's a tax system, and I'm like, that's, like, kind of my choice.
So because you live here, it's okay that we force him at gunpoint to hand over some money to somebody else you care about.
He doesn't have to live here. Or here is in Mexico, by the way, so he doesn't have to live in the U.S.
Cool. So is it okay then for someone to come knock down your door with a gun and say, give me some percentage of your money, because there's these people over in Iran or Iraq or Syria, name the country you want, just pick from the list that's ever growing, to fund those bullets and those airplanes and those drones to go bomb those people because their skin's different and we want something from them? Is that morally okay for them to take that money from you to go do that?
No, I don't think stealing is morally justifiable in this instance. Like, but again, vote with your feet. If you don't, I mean, I hate to sound kind of like a redneck, no offense, but if you don't like this country, then get out. Like, that's just the rules of the game, in the game called America.
Could I interject?
Yeah, tap in, please, buddy.
Do you think, like, well, just to back up, are you opposed to the wars going on that the U.S. military is doing? All?
Absolutely.
Okay, me too. I agree completely.
Yeah.
Do you think you actually have a moral obligation to leave the country? Or basically, do you think you have a moral obligation to pay for something that you're opposed to, or a moral obligation to leave the country if you don't? Like, it basically adds up to, do you have a moral obligation to fund what you think is evil as long as you're in the place called the United States?
No. But I don't know how to change it.
Okay.
That's a separate conversation on how to change it, right? We're just talking about morality, and like, so you agree that it's immoral to fund something against your will of something you don't believe in that's totally evil.
Please give me your definition of morality, so I feel like we're talking about the same thing.
We're using yours. This is just
right.
what
wrong,
you believe.
Okay.
What we believe doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's like I would think you would think it's immoral to just go and stab somebody and take their wallet, right? That's kind of immoral, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
We're just talking about super basic stuff.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure we're on a level playing field.
You got something else?
Well, there's lots of ways it can go. Is there when the practical choice is, you know, if you're here, they're going to demand taxes and they're going to hurt you if you don't pay up. I just want to distinguish between, do you just mean this is the reality of this is what will happen to you if you're here and you're not paying, or do you actually think that's legitimate? Like, do you want somebody either forced to pay or forced out of the country if they don't fund war, like something you don't even like? Or is that just
really
a description of...
way to ask that question? No, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you know that they probably will be, but you're not cheering for that. You're not advocating, like, you either pay for war or I want you forced out of the country.
Right.
Okay.
I'm not for that.
That's just a description of what is, not you. That's not what you want. Okay. If you think of something that you don't want, because we all aren't fond of the warmongering, imagine that. But if you can think of something that you do want government to do, whether it's care for the poor or whatever, and somebody else doesn't want that, do you think it's okay for them to be forced to fund what they're against when it's not what you're against?
No. No, I don't. I'm like butting up against, like, this is the only system I've ever known, and I'd love to see some changes made.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this is like veering off into something else.
Oh,
Thanks, Mike. Because I can't really imagine an alternative, it's kind of like Flatland. I'm like, what else is there?
Right, and that's why the discussion is sort of the hypothetical of what you actually condone. Because if you're used to this your whole life, it's like, well, what else is there? But that's why we're sort of breaking it down to just the basics of how should people treat each other. Like, if you had the choice, would you want to be given the option that you don't pay for anything government does that you don't approve of? And let's say they give you a line item, here's the federal budget, and you can say, I don't want the war, I do want to care for the poor, that you get the choice to decide which things that you're going to pay for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you extend the same courtesy to me?
Yes.
Okay. Would you extend the same courtesy to everybody in the world?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you would preferably have it so people could decide what they wanted to pay for rather than being forced to fund things they're morally against.
Yes. And there's a but to it, but I'm wondering if that would just veer us off the topic.
No, bring up the but. That's what it's for.
So,
it's to explore the finer points where it starts to get confusing and gray.
Okay, thank you. So, if everybody had a choice of what they would fund, like a grocery list or something, if I'm shopping at the supermarket and they can just pick and choose what they want to give their money to, one of my biggest concerns is that there's a lot of people who, I don't know, like a PC word for this, but are like stupid, but not really through much fault of their own because they're exposed to things like fluoride and EMFs and stupid television and things that are just shrinking their brains. So I'd be really concerned about, like, yes, morally, I wouldn't want somebody to pay for something that they did not want to pay for. And I just don't trust a lot of people currently to make good choices that would support the society or the planet.
Okay, and I actually agree with that. And the follow-up would basically just be, do you think it's okay to use force to make people make better choices? Like, first of all, do you agree that lots of people have really unhealthy diets?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think it would be okay to force them to have better diets? Or is it still their choice? I mean, you can try to talk them into it, but do you think it's okay to actually threaten them with force if they don't eat better?
As much as it, like, makes me sad to say this, I guess I want to say no, but I know, like, people really need help in certain areas, so they sign up for being strong-armed a little bit, but again, at the start of it, it was their choice to, like, enter.
Oh yeah, like if they go into a program,
right, something
right.
like that.
Yeah, and if that's their choice and that's consensual, I don't think
like
anybody here would have any
Tide
problem
Pod
with that.
epidemic, right?
Oh,
so
man.
like, there's all this controversy
That's where
online about
society
that.
is going.
I know, right? But it's like, a part of me feels really heartbroken, but the other part of me is like, let them just do it so we can breed that out of humanity. I feel so bad saying that, but that's really, I'm at a loss.
But isn't that better than, like, isn't allowing them their freedom better than forcing, even if we know better? And I would say to people who eat Tide Pods, we do know better. That's dumb. And yet I would never force them not to. I may make fun of them. I may try to talk them out of it.
Right.
But wouldn't you rank their freedom above that sort of the wanting to control their choices and make them make better choices?
If somebody was standing on the ledge of a building, would you do anything you could, including like ripping them off the ledge of the building to save their life? In
that case, I might, especially if they weren't in their right mind. But I think, well, I'll make it a question instead of a statement.
Sure. Wouldn't
You be pretty dang reluctant to force your will on somebody else? Like if it really was, you're about to be dead if I don't intervene, I can understand that. But if it's like, that Twinkie isn't really that good for you, give me that. I assume that's not something you'd be okay with, even though the Twinkie isn't good for you.
Right. Yeah. I'd just be like, whatever, buy the Twinkie, and that's your choice. And I mean, I bought a Twinkie, and I just hope that I can work it out later. But yeah, so I get it. I guess it's just like on a scale of extremes, like, and I feel like we've just reached a really extreme point in our society, but just keeping it to the bare bones questions of like morality and is it right to impose force on somebody to do something against their will? No, I never agree to that, but I worry about people and the choices that they make, and are they competent enough to make good choices? Now, in the absence of education, sounds really crappy when I listen to the words coming out of my mouth. Like, I want people to make the choice for themselves by, like, increased education and not increased force. And I don't know if there's a way to, like, transition into that, because right now we're in, like, a police state where you have to do everything that I say, otherwise I'm going to kill you, or, like, hold a gun to your head and put you in a cage, right? But in, like, the times that we're in, I mean, like, what is the better option? I'd like it to be where everybody's making really informed choices by being really well educated and not eating Tide Pods. And that's just not the world I'm living in right now, apparently. Right? So in the interim, oh God, it sounds so crappy. I don't want anybody to do anything they don't want to do. And people are making really stupid choices nowadays, so I'm feeling like rock and hard place.
Well, you mentioned education. Do you believe government should fund education in schools?
Yeah. Well, not the current one. Yes, but not the way it looks now. You know, if there were no taxes forced on me, I would still pay taxes. Something like taxes.
Like, funding the things you support.
Fund the local private school, right? Instead of the crazy state sponsored.
God, I don't know, because if you've got someone teaching creationism in one school, I mean, like, that's a choice. I guess, again, like, if you don't like what's being taught, you can pick up and move. But should you be forced to move and leave your home because things are a way that you don't like, and there's no people aren't giving you a permission space within to operate in to like homeschool your kids if the public, like state funded, government funded, whatever, is teaching your kids something that you don't believe in. So, I mean, there is room for stuff like homeschooling within a public education system, and yet there's like no room to not pay into a tax system within the country. There should be, though. I mean,
so you don't like the school system the way it is now. I worked with a guy years ago who had 4 kids, and I had this exact discussion with him. I'm like, okay, so you have 4 kids in the school system. I have 0. And I'm paying more taxes than you because you got all these write-offs. Like, how is that fair? And he went into this blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
So,
I know.
I mean, is it fair that I should have to pay for his kids to get educated in a system that's obviously broken?
You don't have to answer that question,
Oh.
but you're allowed to.